So hello everyone, you are very welcome to our webinar number 9, and today our topic of the webinar is global regulatory compliance requirements in wireless and IoT space. And today to moderate the session we have Mr. Ajay Kumar Mittal, or we fondly call him Mr. Mittal, who is the advisor for standardization in wireless and wireline systems at TSDSI. Just a brief about Mr. Mittal. He did his graduation in electronics and communication in 1976 from IIT Roorkee. He also has a diploma in management. He has a long career, over 40 years in the field of telecommunication, and during which he has, spent his time in R&D at Indian telephone industry, joining DOT later, and looking at various domains like satellite communication, OFC, mobile networks, switching systems, transmission systems. The list goes long, but I think from today's topic, which is licensing, regulation, standards, testing, and certification, is something that he has worked on. He has also headed the Telecom Engineering Center (TEC), the technical arm of DOT. He has represented Government of India in various bilateral and multilateral international meetings. Currently, he is associated with TSDSI as advisor with special focus on standardization in wireless and wireless systems. I think Mr. Mittal would later agree with me that the topic is from the current, and who Mr. Kalyan Verma, who is Vice President of Business Team Products, IMEA for TUV Rhineland, can talk about it. So I've heard Mr. Verma in past. He's a very passionate, knowledgeable. So a bit about Mr. Verma, that he has more than 20 years of industrial experience at different roles. And as mentioned about his current position, he's responsible for more than 25 countries. He's involved in testing and certification services in positions for more than 17 years, right from the inception of TUV Rhineland's testing and certification services. Mr. Verma has played a vital role in establishing these activities in India. Under the strong strategic leadership of Mr. Verma, various labs and services of TUV Rhineland India have been established successfully, starting with the Electrical Safety Lab, EMC, Wireless and Photovoltaic Lab across India. The labs have state-of-art of technology of highest quality, conforming to both national and international standards, and carrying various prestigious accreditations such as FCC, CBTL, NABL, MNRE, BIS. Mr. Verma himself is a qualified auditor and technical certified. So I think we are going to have a very interesting discussion today, and I can see that a lot of people are logging in from all over the world. So hello and welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. And we regularly organize these webinar series, which is once in a month, under the aegis of the India EU ICT standards collaboration. Our two main stakeholders are TSDSI and ETSI. So without further ado, I hand over to Mr. Mittal. Welcome, sir. And if you may, start the webinar with introducing the topic and maybe giving your viewpoint.
Thank you, Sachin. And good afternoon and good morning, or maybe good evening to the participants wherever they are located in their respective countries. It is my pleasure to moderate this webinar, which will be delivered by Mr. Verma. And I hope it's going to be very interesting, and you will have a lot of questions to ask, and to make it a very fruitful webinar session. To introduce the subject very briefly, without eating into the much time into the knowledge sharing by Mr. Verma. We all know that wireless devices have been in use from time immemorial, at least for our generations. And but over the period of last maybe 10 to 15 years, the importance of wireless communications has increased many folds. It is all pervasive, almost ubiquitous availability of wireless services, which has placed increasing demand on wireless spectrum, and with increasing wireless spectrum usage on mobile services and other modes of wireless communications, there's a increasing exposure of wireless radiations to the humans. So not only the area of concern to the government is the health of the people, but also to see that all kinds of systems should be able to coexist without interfering into each other, and they should also be able to respect each other's domain and should be controllable in such a way that the services which are being provided they remain uninterrupted and of high quality. So the earlier regulations, they were limited to prescribing the maximum output power in a given spectrum, and also at the borders of the countries to regulate what kind of wireless equipment is coming, and apply the licensing requirements to those equipment to be possessed in that country. But with this explosion of wireless services, and which is going to be multiplied by many folds because of the upcoming invasion, if I can say so, of the Internet of Things. The devices will be there in billions and billions in every nook and corner on the bodies of the persons and everywhere. So, with this kind of wireless explosion inside, the importance of testing and certification has gained greater importance world over. And in each country, each sovereign domain, there are different methods of regulating the wireless usage of wireless equipment or wireless devices. Fundamentally, they are guided by the agreements, international agreements on radio communications, which happens at the level of ITUR, where binding agreements are signed. But beyond that, also there are things which the sovereign governments prescribe. For example, all of us are aware about the specific absorption rate (SAR) value, which has been prescribed as a standard, but different countries implement it in a different way. Similarly, the interference requirements, different regions use different frequencies for same kind of service. And on the borders of countries or on the borders of regions, there are issues of coordination. And the list is long that why we need a proper testing and regulation of wireless devices. So, and in India also recently there has been a notification which has been issued for testing of all kinds of telecommunication devices. Mr. Verma will throw more light on that. So I think with this background, the webinar going to be delivered by Mr. Verma is going to be of good use to all the participants in India and also people participating from different countries to appreciate that how important it is and how it is going to look like in very near future. So thank you very much for patiently hearing me. And now I hand over the session to Mr. Verma to carry forward his webinar.
Yeah. So before you start, Mr. Verma, just a housekeeping announcement. We welcome you to ask questions at any point whenever you have it in mind. You can type it into the questions tab. I would be assigning them to Mr. Verma, and he would take your questions once he has finished his presentation. So over to you, Mr. Verma. Welcome once again.
Yeah, thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Mittalji, and thank you very much for your kind words. So, welcome once again, all the participants. I would say hello because we expected to be participants from all different time zones. Good. Coming to the topic, when we talk about Internet of Things or IoT, this become a very a big buzzword from the common man to the political environment to the economy everywhere. And today, what we would like to see is what is the RF involvement when it comes to IoT as a overall spectrum. So the communication expectations between the devices and the reachability of the information become a vital between the entire new era of information sharing because of the GSM and mobile technology. So when we talk about the last mile connectivity, where we would like to gather the information which we would like to have on our fingertips any point of time, we need to have certain amount of gadgets or devices, how this information can be captured and usually circulated between various aspects. So when we wanted to have the information available from, let's say, from the remote location to a centralized system, we need to have some amount of transmission to happen. So for every transmission, you need a media. So here we would like to concentrate on the various technologies which helps us to gather this information for us and allow us to communicate. So let's look at the various aspects of the IoT and its penetration. Today, if you see, when it comes to wireless technology, especially, and let's look into a little bit RF side, almost every area and every segment of the market, be it from defense, communication, health sector, service sector, smart applications, smart cities. So somewhere this information gathering is necessary, and there's where we would like to have the wireless technology to be evolved. So the RF is involved significantly, not only be in the computer IT sector, it's beyond this sector and in almost every sector. So that's quite a good thing. Now the challenging thing is many of these domain experts, for example, if you talk to a household manufacturer or maybe an oil and natural gas industry, the awareness, the knowledge, the need, and then care to be taken with this technology is not quite matured yet, because it's quite evolving technology at this point of time. So there are quite a lot regulatory challenges and requirements spread across the RF wireless related requirements, which one should keep in mind when these are trying to adopt this technology into their products. Coming to the market potential, I mean, this is really, really quite big. As we see, almost every device what we use at today has one or other kind of wireless. I think the last time when we were looking at one most advanced smartphones, we found more than 12 plus various radios involved in each smartphone. That shows the gamut of wireless. We think it's one phone which is having only LTE GSM, but it has much more technology like Wi-Fi, Zigbee, NFC, and all these technologies, because we wanted to be connected every time. So that opens up a very big opportunity in the market. And the good thing is the market is growing in really in a big folds, and then we estimate the market size also be significantly grown to a huge segments in the coming days. So looking at the regulatory challenges, I would like to emphasize over here once again, the regulatory requirements when it comes to RF is much more stringent than even for a medical device or any other segment, because each and every country, even let's think about SAARC countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, do have certain wireless regulations. Almost every country across the globe need to have certain amount of approvals or a registration before you place a device which is carrying wireless. Maybe this is not true when you talk of electrical safety or electromagnetic compatibility, but in terms of wireless, it is not a free trade movement between the countries, because every government or every regulator in every country would like to know which frequencies are used in their country, which kind of wireless devices are basically published. Um, at at the same time, we don't have one unified universal standard where you can say that by showing compliance with this particular standard, I can achieve a global compliance when it comes to RF. So, however, at the same time, the European regulation as well as the US Federal Communication Committee regulations are quite popular. I would not say they are accepted everywhere, but they're very well penetrated and accepted in most of the countries. Or if in some countries, if they have their own local regulations, but they're still somehow based to European regulations as well as US. So normally, as an industry practice, what we normally recommend to our clients is, if a product is in compliance to ETSI standards and to FCC requirements, to a large extent by design, it can meet more or less requirements of the most of the countries. So CE marking basically gives access to European Union member countries, and FCC give direct access to US market. However, the other countries which has a regulation many times do accept a compliance reports of ETSI, that is for Europe, or FCC in terms of US. Let's look at the various countries' approval process when it comes to wireless telecom related stuff. In India, if you see, there are three major agencies who plays an important role when it comes to regulatory requirements of wireless devices and telecom devices coming to in India. One is Bureau of Indian Standards, mainly look after the electrical safety part of that. However, it can have much more bigger standards also. Telecom Engineering Committee and Wireless Planning Commission. So these are the three agencies at present drafting regulations and having checks and balances to the telecom and wireless devices coming into Indian market. Maybe we will have a little bit more information in the coming slides. Similarly, if you look at South America, we have Anatels, and then if you go to Singapore, we have IDA approval, and if you look at Saudi Arabia, it is a CITC, and in China, it is SRRC. Japan has Japan radio frequency approvals, Australia RCM, and South Africa ICASA. And apart from Asia Pac countries like China, Japan, and most of the other countries do accept test reports of ETSI or FCC and grant their certification. For example, CITC of Saudi Arabia, we don't need to test it again. However, the telecom regulatory approval can be achieved provided the product is in compliance to ETSI standards. Similarly, at present in India, for wireless part, what we would need is we need WPC approval to the wireless side. And to achieve WPC approval, what we would need is you need to have a compliance reports of ETSI standards or an FCC standards. And based on that, WPC will grant you equipment type approval. And if you're a foreign manufacturer, along with equipment type approval, you would also need an import license. So this is how a wireless device can come into Indian market. Little bit other side, when you wanted to launch a wireless device into China market, unfortunately, they do not recognize ETSI and FCC standards compliance as their reference. In fact, they would like to test entirely once again in SSRC recognized laboratories in mainland China. So even though you have these compliances, you would need to still approach SSRC and get the testing done in mainland China. Then only you would get the approvals. Technically speaking, the requirements are not far different from the ETSI and FCC. However, as a local requirement, the testing must be done in mainland China. Similar approach is followed in Japan as well. Whereas an RCM and ICASA still can be achieved with the help of ETSI and FCC documentation. Just to give an indication, a global launch of wireless device of 220 plus countries of requirements, we had an experience of getting almost 200 plus different certifications to make sure that this product is easily able to sell in all different markets. That is the amount of efforts which involves sometimes in wireless. Okay, a little bit brief into the European regulation. I think the colleagues who participated in the workshop, if you are aware of European system, in European system, basically a compliance to a so-called directive is necessary if you wanted to place a device in the European Union market. So by having a CE marking. CE marking means compliance to Europa, compliance to European regulations, where all European member countries do accept a compliance to the standards so that all member countries have a unified approach within the European Union. Recently, there has been a revision, and in the past, we had a directive called Radio Telecom Terminal Equipment Directive, and this has been replaced with the RED directive, Radio Equipment Directive, which came into force in full in 2017. So under each directive, usually there will be a list of harness standards, which you need to show compliance in full before you place the device into the market. And in case if there are any restrictions, especially sometimes certain bands are not uniform, or certain power is not uniform within the European Union, in such countries you need to place the device with a restriction, or you would need to go to so-called a notified body who would evaluate the product to specific country requirements which have been taken care or not. This is called a notified body CE marking when it comes to complete compliance to European all country requirements are not fulfilled. So this is how the compliance to European standards would happen. So under each directive, you will have something called harmonized standards. For example, if you see most of the GSM related requirements are defined in a ETSI EN 301 511. Similarly, we have 301 908, 301 908-13. So various standards are defined for various frequencies. So in addition to that, you might need to show compliance to electrical safety, electromagnetic compatibility, ROHS, maybe and WEEE directive requirements to place the device into the European market. So irrespective of product or domain, so these requirements are applicable for a device if it is entering into the European market. So even though if it's a medical device, if it has a wireless, a red compliance required to be fulfilled. Same with the household, same with ITE product, same with mobility and automotive devices products also. Going a little bit forward, I think there are a few major developments in US market. Normally, we can consider US and Canada together because the technical requirements are almost quite identical. The method of compliance also remains quite identical. For the listeners from India, we have one small technical challenge with the FCC because India as a government of India is not MRA signatory with government of US when it comes to telecom regulations. So what happened in 2015 and 16, the US FCC decided not to extend lab recognition for those countries which are not covered under MRA. Mainly the targeted countries were India and China, mainly China. So to overcome, if you wanted to still do the compliance to FCC using the local labs, we have only two choices. Either we send the products all the way to the country which has labs and the country is covered in MRA like Taiwan or maybe Singapore or Japan, or get the labs available in India A2LA accredited so that the results which are tested in Indian soil will then be accepted by FCC for the DOC method as well as for the FCC certification model. So luckily this A2LA accreditation has been achieved for some of the labs. We S2 Frontend is one of them, so that we can still offer to the clients testing locally to reach US market. Coming to Indian scenario, as I mentioned earlier, WPC is the one which basically the agency which takes care of the wireless requirements and certification activities. However, in the recent days, TEC is also come up with a mandatory regulation and designated CABs, conformity assessment bodies, so that the new telecom regulations which are effective from 1st October will be fully implemented. So as WPC is only responsible looking at the wireless requirements and accreditations of ETA, equipment type approvals, TEC is would cover much more bigger space, including entire telecom products and products which are having a wireless in that. So the TEC regulations now in the process of launching in 1st October 2018, already the gadgets have been out in the market. The products which are required to be imported into need to then meet mandatory TEC regulation in coming days. Apart from TEC, we have some additional regulations which are expected to be anytime available in Indian soil, Indian market. Would be Automotive Regulatory Authority of India's regulation when it comes to vehicle tracking systems, and then variables, and then protocols of the variables. So here, one attention I would like to draw to all of you. So if you look at the WPC, they are mainly looking at the radio frequency and radio frequency related compliance. But a wireless device to work properly, we also need to look after the interoperability, where the various alliances do come into the play. So at present, by many of the regulatory standards, the protocol compliances is not mandated. However, when it comes to smart gate, smart city applications, or device-to-device interface or protocol compliance, the compliance to these protocols interoperability becomes a little bit necessary, so that two different wireless technologies or two different devices of same wireless technology do communicate without any errors or without any data losses. So even in BIS, we have a wireless IoT solutions requirements which are expected to come in. There are new standards which are under draft and which are already getting published under LITD working committees of Bureau of Indian Standards. So if you look at the TSD DSI, it's quite active, supporting all these agencies, also to bringing on the cellular related standards into the Indian market, and also acts as the strong partner to Indian industry to make sure that standards are harmonized with ITU and other ETSI regulations and standards internationally. Coming to the future market drivers, as most of you are aware, the technology is driving pretty fast, because we as users, because of the smart homes availability everywhere, we would like to have every information at our fingertips. So this is basically giving us an opportunity for us. Also, a lot of new innovations in the various areas of the technologies, be it automated lighting system, energy store and gas and water metering, connected cars, smart surveillance devices, and then medical devices, household appliances. All these devices do coming into the wireless technologies. I think the biggest driver in India, especially where internationally people are looking at wireless technology, is smart city implementation in India. So all the cities identified by government, central government, also the upcoming cities in India, which we would like to have smart cities. That means almost everything in the city are connected, and then data is available on the fingertip without any manual intervention. That could be management of street lights, or power distribution system, or switching the water supply, and then monitoring the leakages. All these things could be possible with the wireless technologies. So as I mentioned in the earlier slide, to make this enable, we need the protocols, which basically enables the interoperability of the devices, such as LoRa, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Sigfox, Wi-SUN. So these are the alliances promoted on specific applications, having unique features of each of them, and then suitable for different applications. Some of them are good for low power, high transmission. Some of them are high data rated transmission. All these features will be there. A suitable technology will be implemented and based on the application, and it need to show compliance to this protocol alliance requirement to make the device compatible, also to use the compliance logos of these particular technologies. Usually these requirements do come on top of the regulatory requirements of the national regulators. Yeah, so the examples still continue, like FOB keys, tracking and navigation devices, RF tags, infotainment systems, all these things are coming quite a lot. I think mobility industry is also a significant driver of wireless technologies, because we would like to have the infotainment tracking systems as one of the key major drivers. And we see a significant growth of wireless technology into mobility industry because of its luxurious demand, also the user experiences which are getting updated day by day. Smart lighting, as I mentioned, energy is always a big challenge. So with the help of smart lighting, with the LED coming into the lighting technology, management of lighting in the industries, shopping malls, as well as other areas, would give a significant technological advantage. Also, it's quite important for the DESCOMs, basically to monitor the theft as well as the leaks by using the technology of wireless to ensure the losses and the drops and all the stuff. So this is playing quite a vital role. Medical. So when you look at the medical devices, I think this is one of the most, I would say, conservative industry where normally new technology adaptation is wouldn't take some time because of the patient and the data accuracy concerns with the patient related aspects. But if you see in last few years, most of the medical devices do come with the connectivity to external world in the form of wired or wireless, and keeping the advantage of wireless, nowadays most of the devices do come with wireless technologies. At least I can give you an example. We work with one of the major medical device manufacturers globally, and they have a policy driven 3 years back that no new launch will be made of their product without wireless connectivity technology inbuilt. So this is how the wireless technology is penetrating into the even medical industry as well. Okay, so what happens when the wireless technology penetrates into the products? Like any other technology, there will be some side effects. So once wireless technology is bringing into that, when we use this device proximate to our body, we also need to observe the radiation coming of these devices and how much that would affect a human tissue. So this is basically a measurement method, can be proved that whether these radiations are harmful or well within the range which is acceptable to the human beings or not. So there is a test called SAR, specific absorption rate, which has become more significant, important, and relevant nowadays because of the various radio frequency technologies coming into the market. So any device which is having a radio frequency and which required to be used proximate to human body need to evaluate for the SAR requirement, so that if you use a normal scenario, the radiations generated by the device do not harm the human tissue. So this is a requirement in almost every country, including in India, and most of the devices need to show compliance to this requirement before they place into the Indian market. So as I mentioned, you have various alliance and alliance related technologies which are required to be complied when it comes to the alliance compliance requirements of the devices. So with the keeping in mind, I would say this would be the concluding part from my side, and I would once again hand over to Sachin, and then we can take the questions accordingly. Sachin?
That was quite insightful, and I don't know if your last slide have contact details.
Yes, it has the contact details.
Slide?
Yes, yes. Sachin, can you hear me?
Okay. So, as you might have noticed, that questions coming already. There are questions coming already from participants, but before the questions from participants to you, Mr. Mittal, if he wants to ask you a question.
Yeah, Sachin, your voice is a little bit breaking.
Very insightful and very useful.
Okay, so let me just small to
Um, Hello, Sachin, I cannot hear you. At least on my screen, I can see two questions. One from Mr. Ritesh Kumar, sub-giga bands in India is delicensed to IoT like use cases. However, the ETSI standards are a slightly wider band. For new devices or technology developed in this band, what are the standards applicable in India and test procedures? Okay. A quick answer for this, we still need to follow ETSI standards as a basis for the compliance, keeping the frequency allocation into mind. For example, the Indian regulation allows you to operate only 865 to 867. A suitable ETSI standard, I think in my opinion, it is 300 ETSI 300 220 need to be applied, keeping the frequency in mind. Okay, there is one more question from Philip Grahand. I think Philip from GIZ, if I'm not wrong. And from Europe Prospect, what shall be the new data protection regulation in India? Pay particularly attention to with regard to wireless and IoT. Yeah, quite a big and a big topic. At present, I think with the IoT coming into the picture, the data privacy and protected privacy becomes a big challenge. At present, internationally, GDPR regulations in Europe are quite popular, and I would suggest that we should somehow base our regulation on base of GDPR, because this is one formal regulation at present in the market which is available and becoming mandatory by middle of this year from Europe.
yeah. So hello, can you hear me, Verma?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, I can hear you, Sachin now.
So I faced bad connection. So I request you to ask the participant questions right away, and at a later point, we have Mr. Mittal for asking more questions. So you already have some participants.
Yeah,
PC.
I just answered two questions. I could see two more questions. I will go ahead with them. I mean, there are more. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Are ZigBee standards,
please
IEEE standard being
and
adopted in?
please proceed.
Yeah. Okay. There is a question from Suresh Kananur. Are ZigBee standards or IEEE standards are being adopted in India by BIS? Okay. When it comes to ZigBee, again, we are talking about 2.4 gig communication. So BIS or WPC or TEC are concerned with the frequency, and for them, ETSI standards are a reference basis, and ETSI 300 220 should be the mandatory requirements for the compliance 2.4. For alliance, we need to still follow ZigBee requirements. And there is a question from Vivek Deshpande. Is there any interoperability standard evolved yet? In India, at this point of time, not. Only international alliances which are having their own proprietary protocols have interoperability requirements at this point of time. In BIS, there is a LITD committee which is working on interoperability standard for Indian requirements at this point, but there is no regulation for interoperability as such. Again, there is a question from Suresh Kananur. Are Zigbee standards being adopted by India and Zigbee standards are being, okay, this we are already answered. Is there in any TV white spaces are open for licenses free band? I'm not very sure what is the question. Maybe we would need a little bit more information on that. Sachin, the questions which are there on my screen, I could answer.
Yeah, and then yeah, for the question might be provide a specific license and band now. And also there's no
Sorry, Sachin, still the voice is quite feeble.
providing.
Okay, so in that case, we'll try to keep the minimum. I don't know if my voice is okay or was Mr.
No, almost both of your voice is quite
feedback?
unstable.
Okay, no worries. I would then ask coming. So we from asking more questions to you, and you please go ahead and answer questions from participants.
Okay, and yeah, I think Mr. Deshpande, I might need. Yeah, I think that there is some in India. There is a question from Vikas. Vikas, in India, the ISM band used especially for IoT is 865 to 867. However, it looks like there is a lot of interference from GSM frequency from mobile towers of 900 megahertz. How can this be resolved? Actually, according to the test methods, we do the cross-channel and cross-band requirements. If the devices are properly complied, we should not have the issue of 900 megahertz. But as a compliance to the standards, I would not be the right person to say how we can avoid the broad spectrum requirement related issues. Okay, there is a question from Madan Raj Ramlingam. Could you please describe the requirements for import license of Wi-Fi modules? Yes, if you have a Wi-Fi module, to bring them into India, you need two documents. One called ETA, Equipment Type Approval. This can be achieved by having the ETSI standards compliance report and then submit those documentation along with other documentation to WPC. In addition to that, you need an import license. This import license will allow you 6 months valid for 6 months, and you need to have a local representative who then allowed to import a wireless modules to Indian market. Okay, Sachin, I think the questions are, yeah, there is one more question from Vivek Deshpande. Okay, I got, there is a question from Vivek. In India, there is a band of frequency are allocated, some frequency are still not used anywhere, that are TV white spaces. Okay, I at this point of time, as far as I know, the frequency allocation is purely done by WPC and TRI. So I will not be able to answer that question on their behalf. Yeah, Madan Raj, the answer what I gave is for India, ETA plus import licenses. There's a question from,
One more question from Mr. Vikas.
yeah, there's a question from Vikas. if the wireless module is having WPC approval already, should the equipment using that module need to undergo WPC approval again? Okay. Um, so, yeah. So what happens is it's a little bit a tricky situation with the WPC. If you have an individual module which is already approved by WPC, and if you bring them that into a product which is carrying a different model number, then normally WPC do not recognize that as approved, because the model what they approved as a module and the product which is in the market with a different model number are not identical. Technically it could be allowed, but in WPC does not like to recognize a full product compliance because the model number does not match. Yeah, testing efforts could be significantly reduced. However, you still would need to file with some amount of spurious emission measurement, go back to WPC and then say there is an approved module and my final model is like, let's say ABC, and I would need a equipment type approval for ABC, having a module of XYZ.
Yeah, I see no more questions from the participant as yet, so I can just butt in and put my question, Mr. Verma.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So my question was that with the impending large-scale penetration of IoT devices in the country, and for various applications and use cases, uh, what do you suggest that the testing should be handled as a policy in the country, and what are the challenges for the labs to take care of that kind of load which will be generated in the coming months and years?
So let me try to answer in as brief as possible. At present, if you ask me honestly, if there is a many devices come into the force immediately, we are not equipped to handle the entire load in India. We have a few handful of labs which can do this for a very simple reason. It needs a significant investment because of anechoic chamber requirement. Also, they upgrade us very fast. So we are already talking about 5G communication. We are already talking about gigahertz interferences and all the stuff. So this brings a challenge in the lab setup and management of the lab facilities. So at this point of time, as definitely a policy decision would be needed, where it allows to bring a lot of investment. Of course, maybe if government decides to handhold the industry with certain investment, that would be an ideal way of going ahead.
My second question is regarding the mobile devices in general, not particularly IoT. And we know that for the 3GP based standards, GCF is a forum which handles the test cases for the mobile devices. And
Yes.
it also, if the devices meet that particular criteria and tested in the GCF accredited labs, they are GCF certified. But when we look at this and see the kind of handset market India has, a large number of products being introduced in the country at regular intervals, and the time taken to carry a full-fledged GCF testing is quite significant. So, what is your recommendation that how mobile device testing should be handled in India, and what kind of challenges the labs will face in dealing with the introduction of these kinds of devices in the market?
Sir, actually, in my opinion, you need definitely a discipline in the market. So RF side, because WPC, for whatever the reasons, there are certain amount of compliances already in place. But when it comes to interoperability, device interference, quality point of view, at present, since we don't have a regulation, something like a GCF, it is missing. So even though there is a volume increase, I strongly recommend some amount of interoperability requirements to be in place in the market. In fact, we were talking to a couple of carriers providers to bring some at least requirements by them to connect to their networks, so that the the call drop issues and data loss issues can be addressed better way. At present, we are only debating, but then the solution should be the interoperability requirement, something like GCF.
So there are two more questions, Mr. Verma, which have come while Mr. Mittal was asking you questions. And I think there are
Yes.
some more coming. So can you look at them?
Yeah, there is one from Vikas. If the module number matches with the one used within the equipment, then is WPC approval required for the equipment? Okay, I think Mr. Vikas, thing is like WPC is a little bit tricky. They go strictly by the documentation. So if you say a wireless module, then the wireless Wi-Fi module of ABC, if it's approved, that's fine. But end product, the description and the model number, if it's different, sometimes you would have a challenge. Why? Because the only checkpoint for WPC approval is basically the customs. I think it becomes a little bit difficult for anybody to go and explain to the customs because they strictly go by book rule, and the certificate what you show and the product imported into the country does not match, then you might have some challenges. Sometimes you could be lucky to get it through, but then I would suggest get the approval for the product again. That would be more easiest way. Vishnu Ram has one more question. What are the license requirements for experimentation in India in IoT? As a researcher, can I purchase a module like USRP, broad and experiment an unlicensed band? There are some provisions in WPC to apply for a unlicensed band for the for a certain period. The process is a little bit complex, and then it can take significant time also. It is theoretically possible, and we could get some, we have at least experienced in a couple of cases where such licenses were issued for unlicensed band by WPC, but I would say the process is really complex. There is a question from Christopher. Can public-private partnership assist addressing the challenges outlined? What form should their partnership take? Yes, it's possible. There are some at least initiatives what at least we are aware from the Department of Electronics and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. They have come up with SPVs, special purpose vehicles, where industrial associations and industrial clusters can approach with a strong business proposal with a clear market focus, and there could be some support from the Department of Electronics in the form of investment, also handholding in the beginning of the years to come up to a matured level.
Okay, so I think Mr. Verma, you have done a very good job patiently answering the questions. And while some more questions might be coming, but it's good that we have your email ID on the screen. So we encourage the participants to, if they want to get in touch, directly write the questions to you. But at this point, probably I would like to conclude the webinar, and I would probably request Mr. Mittal again that here listening to you and listening to the questions, what are the last comments, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Verma. And the overall thrust of the presentation was introduction of variety of policies and directives in different countries, and a very specific emphasis on the emerging things in India, existing and emerging policies in India, and also the challenges emerging out of that. Basically, the questions which you answered, which the participant asked, they ranged from the licensing part, the spectrum, and WPC policies, and what kind of private-public partnership can happen to carry the work forward in the area of testing. So the questions or the ideas which will remain in mind are that the coming times are very exciting in terms of the market, which the mobile devices are already capturing, and they will have the sway in the coming months, and how the government in India and also in other countries, they face up this challenge and regulate the wireless devices from the point of view of coexistence of the networks, proper quality of service, and also from the point of view of public health. So it is for also for the thought. A thought has been left with the participants in their countries that they think about it and probably become the initiators of certain new thoughts and the new policies wherever they are working or sitting or wherever they are studying or teaching in whatever profession they are. I would like to conclude by saying that it has been a very useful presentation from your side, and the questions from the participants have really shown that they have taken a lot of interest in this, and a lot of learning is being taken from this seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Verma. I think you want to say something?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for organizing, and then thank you, Sachin and Mithil, for this. And thank you very much, participants, for the active participation.
Yeah, I can already see that Philip is thanking you from GIZ. So thank you, Philip, for attending the webinar. But thank you all. And since we are doing this webinar series every month, so if you think we should address any specific topic, don't hesitate to write to us, and we look forward for your participation in future. So over from our side now, and thanks once again, Mr. Verma. We sign off from
Thank you.
today. Thank you.
Thank you.